Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Actual Magician's Bookshelf. Yes, I am an actual magician. So today we are going to be covering the Black Arts by the British historian Richard Cavendish. He was born in 1930 and died in 2016. And his most influential book, to me at least, is The Black Arts, which I think was republished as The Magical Arts at a later date. Ironically, this version is by Pan, published by Pan Books. And I bought this copy of The Black Arts by Richard Cavendish for 15 pence. It would have been second hand, probably from Derby Eagle Centre, where I bought a lot of my Call of Cthulhu books and other similar tawdry paperbacks with beguiling covers. So The Black Arts is a little bit of a misnomer, as we'll come to see. Now, one of the other influential books, certainly to me, by Richard Cavendish, was the Tarot, this large bumper book. And I'm not sure how long I've had this one, but it's certainly seen the wars. I actually got this from Golden Dawn Books in Manchester at the Corn Exchange, so that would have been fairly early on in my own magical progression. It was likely in the mid-80s, probably something like that. So The Black Arts itself was published, first of all, by Routledge and Kegan Paul in 1967, and this version was published in 1969, so I would have been 4 years old when it was first published, and I bought it when I was about 17. One of the interesting things about this book is that it is fairly neutral in its stance on all matters occult, as you would expect from a sort of historical point of view and a scholarly point of view. In fact, this little book packs an awful amount of punch, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It has a full bibliography at the back of it, and it has reading suggestions. It has copious notes for each of the sections. And it also covers the world of the black magician. Again, it's a slight misnomer, which we'll come to look at very shortly, as to what a black magician actually is and might be. But it covers the magician's universe, imitative magic and the magical link, analogies and correspondences, which I think is one of the most long-lived and important contributions of the Western Esoteric Initiatory System to spiritual development, mystical experience, and religion and magic itself, is the introduction of the concept of correspondences. The Modern Magician, so it has a section on Eliphas Levi to Aleister Crowley, and then it has a chapter on names and numbers. Chapter 3 is the Kabbalah and Names of Power, so it covers in 4 sections the Kabbalah, and most importantly for what we're going to look at specifically today, the Stone and the Elixir, a 3-section chapter 4 on alchemy. Then it's got a chapter 5 on astrology, a chapter 6 on ritual magic, which is possibly where most people will immediately go and look in the chapter of ritual magic in the Black Arts as a practical handbook. And this has got the rather enigmatic and mystical, magical hooks of preparations in the magical circle, the sacrifice and the summoning, the lords of darkness, necromancy and psychic attack, and even a section on low magic as well, for whatever he defines as low magic. It has chapter 7, the worship of the devil, with the origins of Satan, witchcraft and the black mass. But you'll notice this is sort of put in almost as a final chapter. And this is really what the title of the book is. It's about the Black Arts. So it's interesting that he has then put that at the back. There is also 2 appendices. One is a list of grimoires, including the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon. I'll just put that there so that we can see the type of grimoires, the Red Dragon. Now, interestingly enough, there are lots of new editions of these, which we'll perhaps come to look at by Black Letter Press. I've got the Red Dragon, the Black Poulet, the Black Hen, and so forth. And then also there's a brief little set of correspondences at the back there in Appendix 2. So, as I say, this book really does pack a punch. Now, why do I think it's important, and why was it so influential in my development of what I call the Western Esoteric Initiatory System? That really comes from the chapter on the making of the stone is the section, the making of the stone, and that is chapter, let me just go back to the beginning here, and that is in chapter 4, the stone in the elixir, section 2, the making of the stone. So it's sort of right buried in the middle of the book, as all good information should be. It's how we keep it from the eyes of the profane. We hide all of the secret knowledge in words and then bind them in books to make sure that people who don't read don't get the secret. So the making of the stone starts off with an interesting quote from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, and it goes like this. Up from Earth's centre through the 7th gate I rose, and on the throne of Saturn sate, and many a knot unravelled by the road, but not the master knot of human fate. There was a door to which I found no key, there was the veil through which I might not see. Some little talk a while of me and thee there was, and then no more of thee and me. And it's an interesting quote to start something on alchemy about, but it does give us the idea that there is a journey towards unity, a journey towards the dissolution of separation, illusionary separation between thee and me. Thee being the entire universe in this case, and me being the falsely identified, self-reflective notion of having a self. And the fact is that the door has no key, the veil you can't see through, but you can rise through these grades towards that sense of unification. And I think this is really what makes the book that Richard Cavendish had really zoned in on the specific concern of the Western Esoteric Initiatory System as a spiritual path, as a magical path. That the black arts is merely the come hither invitation into experimentation with one's own relationship to reality. And even if through the black arts you have to burst through your religious beliefs, your expectations, you have to undo those in an almost tantric-like manner by a form of desecration of your long-hallowed beliefs, then that is one way of doing it. It's one way of breaking yourself out of the controlling nature of your own religious structure. And that can be seen as very profane and evil, for whatever that word means, as a process to some people. So the black arts is really using that as the cover and the title and the hook at the back, but it actually takes you through the process that is actually going on. And I want to read this little section here from page 182 of the book, and I'm just wondering if I can hold this up and read it simultaneously. for the purposes of the transcript and so forth. But this is the most important bit of this book to me. You can see how stained this book is. I must have had it open while I was burning incense, burning candles, drinking tea and other forbidden substances, I'm sure. So let's have a look then. It says this: solution, which roughly corresponds to the moon in the tarot, is a process of deep self-examination and self-disgust. The calcined powder, which stands for the more enduring characteristics beneath a man's surface, is dissolved in mercurial water. The alchemist's underlying attitudes, prejudices, tastes, deep-rooted patterns of feeling and reaction are dissolved away through the action of Mercury, that is, intelligent insight into himself. The difficulty of the process was to find the true philosophical Mercury, the true insight, and it carries the danger of mental collapse, fear, despair, illusion, and self-deception, all of which correspond to the moon, of course. And it is this section that really consolidated for me the connection between Kabbalah, the tarot, alchemy, and processes of self-examination, particularly from a Gurdjieffian point of view, which was where my first occult teacher really came from, was a Gurdjieffian fourth way background, which is far more to do with the self-analysis, self-examination processes that are important to the first stages of the great work, what we might call the great work. And in this book, right buried in the middle of it, we have that section that really makes clear that the stone is the self, that the workshop is the self, that the worker is the self. And it is that is going through all of the processes of alchemy in a structured way, where one stage sort of follows the other. And the fact is that each of those stages is always being worked all the way from the calcination at the bottom of the alchemical process all the way to the true stone at the top of the process. So I think I owe Richard Cavendish a great debt for helping consolidate what I saw as the fundamental concern of the Western Esoteric Initiatory System. It is a state change that leads to a progressively more comprehensive, consistent and congruent state of consciousness in relation to the experience of truth and the universe itself. And in order to do that, we have to burn through all of the stages of alchemy. We have to ascend the Sephiroth at the Tree of Life. It doesn't matter really what map we use, and indeed what methodology. For example, you can use the black arts themselves in order to break through that conditioning. Chaos magic, the Dice Man technique, which is one of the books that I'll be coming to in this series. Each of these has a map for us and a set of methods by which we may progressively discard the old stone and find the true stone that we then touch to the universe to turn everything into the true philosophical gold. As it is said, aurum non nostrum vulgi, our gold is not the common gold. The alchemy in here, the black arts in here, are not what they appear to be. And I think that's one of the great secrets of magic, that we are able to keep it as a facade, as a scaffolding system, so that only the people who are willing to work through it and experience what is within it are going to eventually find what the truth of that work actually is within it. So I highly recommend grabbing a copy of the Black Arts. It is very dated now, of course, and in the bibliography and suggestions for further reading at the back here, which I'll try and show you in full, if you want to pause and make a note of that, I think that's hopefully in focus. Some of these still stand. I think on Gnosticism, there have been a little bit more progressive works made, which I'll possibly come to. I'm going to do some shorts on this channel with my top recommended books in different subjects and my top 5 books in different categories and so forth from the Actual Magician's bookshelf, and I will include some of the recommended books in each section in that series of shorts. So it does have things like Margaret Murray's Witch Cult in Western Europe and The God of the Witches, but it also has a corrective by Elliot Rose in this case called A Razor for a Goat, which I think is talking about Occam's razor and its application to the theories about witchcraft at the time as what Richard Cavendish calls a corrective to Margaret Murray and Summers as well. The Jewish magic, he talks about the Mather's edition of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. There have been other editions published since. The works of Dion Fortune he mentions, which I'm going to cover on this channel as well, both the fiction and non-fiction work of Dion Fortune. He talks about Aleister Crowley and The Great Beast, which is one of the alternative books that I was going to cover in my second episode, this episode, but I'll actually be covering The Great Beast and its influence on me, and this is my original copy as well. And how Aleister Crowley's magic and life inspired my travels, but also some of the important things from his actual notebooks. We'll be covering those in episode 3, the next episode. He also talks about numerology, Kabbalah, but again, a lot more books have been written since this was published in the late 60s, republished in the late 60s. And I'm going to be covering those in the shorts. So I look forward to seeing you in episode 3, where, yes, I will be covering The Great Beast. And if you've got any questions about what is black magic, what is the left-hand path, how does that really gel with everything else that we're talking about in the whole field of Western esoteric systems, then please make a comment and ask a question in the comments. I'll be delighted to discuss that with you. I think as well, from my point of view, just as a personal aside, my first girlfriend was a Satanist. I worked a lot with Satanism in my younger years and corresponded with a lot of Satanists, and I'm more than aware of the work of the Temple of Set and other so-called black lodges over the years, and I've written about those comprehensively in a book called The Magister, which Charlotte Louise and I are currently rewriting. It's this book up here, and there's a self-published version of it as well. And in one of the episodes, I'll be talking about the history of that publication as well. But I think there's, again, a lot of misnomers about the black arts and the left-hand path and chaos magic and its connection with evil, demonology, Satanism and so forth, Setianism, whatever one wants to term it. And that's something that I think is probably best suited for a civil discussion in the comment section rather than an ad hoc discussion of it in video. Although I might actually come around to doing that as well. So thanks a lot for bearing with me. I'm looking forward to elevating the editing of these videos and various other forms of the format itself, particularly with the shorts that I intend to do in my adventure in video over 2024. So thank you for joining me in that. And I look forward to seeing you in episode 3, which should be in about 1 week's time. I'm aiming to do one of these, probably releasing them, is that what one says with a video, every Friday. Thanks a lot.